This is Tyler, your antisocial critic and the host of the AntiSocial Network, your number one source for anachronistic conversations online. Come join us each week to hear opinions from some of the best voices discussing entertainment, politics, religion, and modern life on the internet today, most of which you've never heard of, but I have. Joining us once again is our favorite academic from the University of Chicago, Professor Fulton-Brown. How's it going?
I'm happy to hear I'm your favorite. I like that.
Well,
wait, but you said favorite academic. That could be a very small group.
Well, I enjoy kind of just like stalking the academy, even though I'm not a member of it. So the fact that I get to correspond with one of them in any sort of serious way it's important to me.
I feel like you've gone out in the wild and captured one. Here, look, I've got my academic. Let's show it off.
Well, there we go. So last time we kind of talked back in, I think, November, we kind of spitballed the idea of doing just something kind of briefly talking about Mel Gibson movies, because you had been, Milo had peer pressured you into watching Apocalypto. So I wanted to kind of double back on that and see if we could go deeper on that discussion, because I think there's something there. Especially, I'm interested to hear what you have to say as someone who's probably shares more of his Catholic beliefs than I would necessarily. So,
well, absolutely, and of course, Milo has gone through a big transformation in the time that we talked, or at least has made it public, right? That he has not only, I mean, he's always been Catholic, but now he's a practicing Catholic and ex-gay, which can go a lot of different ways. But we'll talk about Mel Gibson first.
Priorities. So you said you watched specifically Apocalypto and the Patriot. Did you rewatch them recently, or has it been a while since you jumped on them?
I didn't have a chance to rewatch them, but I was thinking about what I shared about that. I've been watching a lot more Mel Gibson movies because I had the misperception for a long time that he basically did Lethal Weapon and The Passion of the Christ, and that was it, right? and I saw Braveheart with my dad, who on the one hand sort of loved the Scottish history, but on the other knew enough of the Scottish history to know that Braveheart is not historically accurate in the slightest. But Dad was very interested in William Wallace and saw him as part of the story. That when Dad came and visited me when we were I was in the UK, we went up to Scotland, right, and we stomped around the battlefields, and he was able to narrate the whole thing. And so seeing Braveheart for him was a little bit of a trial, because he kept saying, "That's wrong." So I had the sense of Gibson as a good action film actor, right? The Lethal Weapon series, and I knew about The Passion of the Christ. I mean, obviously from when it came out, and that one I watched. I've never had the sort of I don't know what the right word is. It's like I watched it back basically when my first book came out, From Judgment to Passion, right? Aware that The Passion of the Christ was obviously touching on things that I'd been writing about in my scholarship, right? The imagining the events of the crucifixion in, I will not say the word horrific detail, because I want to talk some about what horror actually is in this context, but in certainly vivid detail, right? And I was aware of Gibson saying that he had used some of the visions, Sister Mary, and I forget what her name is, but what was interesting to me is he says, this is these ancient stories, and to my mind, those visions are actually nearly modern, right? They're drawing on this long tradition of sort of imagine yourself in the scene practice that goes back to, the Greek Orthodox tradition, but it becomes very prominent in the medieval Catholic tradition. And so I watched The Passion of the Christ, and I did it like as a job. I put it on my computer player in my office and sat there in my campus office watching this really intense movie. and after that, I kind of didn't watch him at all for a long time. I mean, I heard about the things that were said around the Passion of the Christ and worried about whether it's anti-Semitic. And of course, I've seen more recently his responding, well, it's in the Gospels, which he's right? The sort of things that people point out as worrying about it being anti-Semitic are simply the representation of Jesus's execution within the Gospel story. And then, I'm, as you say, talking to Milo, and he's going on and on about how cool Apocalypto was. And so it's like I can't remember exactly when I watched Apocalypto. I've sort of lost I used to have like really great chronology until COVID. 2020, right? COVID's like it changed my practices in a lot of different ways, but the main thing it does is I can't remember exactly when things happened over this last year, which is
just
weird.
Given the world a Tarkovskian kind of vision of time where just everything just stretches out and it means nothing and you're just lost within it.
Very much so. I mean, until this past year, if you asked me like month near today when things happened, I could tell you, right? And this last year, really not so much. And there's also another reason. I'm waiting for you to interrupt me and ask me some questions. Don't let me just lecture, because you know I can do this, right?
It's your job.
I was telling you, but one, it's my job, and two, sort of warmed up from doing my Tolkien video this afternoon.
Yeah,
I can go on. So you better just jump in.
I mean, I was gonna jump on the Wallace point from in regards to Braveheart. There's a YouTuber I really like called History Buffs, and his whole deal is that he goes through like war movies and historical event movies, and he just kind of takes them apart and says how realistic are these movies compared to the actual history. And it's funny because that he absolutely despises Mel Gibson, not morally to any degree, because I don't think History Buffs has any sort of public political opinions. He just doesn't like the historical elements to them because he thinks that they're playing very fast and loose with all the facts. And I'm inclined to mostly agree. Like, Apocalypto specifically apparently condenses about 800 years of history down into like a 90-minute, like 1 week story, where you got everything from like the tribal period of South America to the conquistadors. It happens in 1 week essentially, which not true, but I think the interesting thing about Mel Gibson's movies is what they're all kind of they're trying to capture something else using the imagery, so it doesn't necessarily bother me that they're ahistorical, as long as they're kind of like you grapple with the fact that they're somewhat ahistorical. I mean, even Passion is specifically I'm not going to call pastiche isn't the right word, but it's honing in on such a specific moment in the story of the Gospels that it's trying to specifically capture the elements of it that clearly meant something to Gibson in his own faith. And more so than most other depictions of the crucifixion, because other ones usually have the much wider ranging story involved, where you have everything about Christ's ministry, and then everything surrounding the resurrection and Christ's return to earth. So there's something about that, about the crucifixion, that specifically appealed to Gibson. And on the anti-Semitism note, I always thought it was excruciatingly important in the movie that he plays the centurion, that he's the one that specifically stabs Christ. And I think that kind of encapsulates the entire ethos, as it's supposed to be a movie about this is what we're doing to him. This is our culture. Right. This is what we do to him. So I guess setting aside the loose the way they costumes them, I never thought that charge was particularly copacetic, but my interest in Gibson's filmography is more so in what he's trying to get to with these very fictionalized kind of images of history, even though they aren't necessarily 100% accurate, or just because
they're not even near accurate.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly right. Right, they're mythologies. And so with the Passion, I mean, again, I haven't seen it since 2004 or so, maybe 6. I can't remember. I tried sending Gibson a copy of my book at that time, because I'm like, ooh, you're working in the same tradition I am, which is this devotional tradition of, I mean, as in fact, right, he tries to do in the movie, imagine yourself in this moment, in this scene, and there's a deep, medieval tradition. One of the major texts is the Meditations on the Life of Christ attributed to Bonaventure. So it's called the Pseudo Bonaventure, and it's got some other attributions and things like that. But one, it's it's a longer meditation that takes you through his whole life and such. But it's written with clear instructions to the reader to say at the Passion, right? Imagine yourself there in the scene, helping Mary wipe up the blood, right? Which is obviously in the movie. Or when he falls, you imagine yourself. And I can't remember whether they do it exactly that, but wouldn't you want to be helping him lift back up the cross and so forth? And in the movie, what I saw Gibson doing, although he claimed to be, using these historical accounts and it's all, historical things like that, but what he was actually tapping into was the devotional desire to participate in the event in history, right? But not in history as in get it all accurate and make sure that you reference all your sources, but that it happened in time and in, not eternity, but actually within the sort of temporal mode of cause and effect and things like that. And that's not the way the medieval tradition would think about it. They just think about it as a real story, right? This really happened. And in that desire, you get to you want to have all of the scents, all of the sounds, all of the feelings and textures and things like that. And so the more Gibson in the movie, in The Passion of the Christ, makes you have that visceral, fleshly feeling of what's happening in the crucifixion, indeed, the more like a medieval devotion it actually is. So it fits with his own devotional vision, certainly. And the thing is, I think his other historical movies, like Braveheart, like Patriot, like Apocalypto, or like Santa Claus, right? The Santa Claus one, Batman that just did. They're all trying to tap into the spiritual reality, which is instantiated through story, right? And I don't know, because I haven't ever talked to him, I'd like to, whether he appreciates this at this level, but I do know we just saw Milo was doing an interview with Father Altman, and one of the pictures that floated around about that was Altman having dinner with Gibson and one of their other friends. So, I don't know who Gibson is talking to at the spiritual level, but he is making movies that make sense to me as a medieval student of the symbolism, right?
Yeah, I mean, even just on the surface, I've always noticed that there's a clear sense of kind of duality in his films that kind of spark that that I kind of sense as this kind of dueling between the extremes of the physical and the spiritual, which both get taken to probably the absolute, as far as you can take it, in terms of like the absolute physical horror of reality versus the absolute beauty of the divine, and how those things are constantly in tension with one another. And you see it all over his filmography. And I don't want to psychoanalyze him too much, but he is famous as a person for having alcoholism issues, and I would assume some level of depression, because he's some kind of a, what's the word? Like he pours a lot of that into his performances, and I get the sense that he kind of definitely, that part of his being is kind of caught up in that tension of I am a chronically depressed person who is kind of beset by this desire to seek the divine, even though my own spirit is in a space of chaos. And you kind of see that in the way he kind of the physical torment of the body is kind of focused on in every single one of his movies, and in some more than others, obviously. Like I talked about Hacksaw Ridge last time we were talking briefly, and I think that one probably most articulates his kind of, I'm not gonna say that psychosis, but his kind of tension. It's because it's about Desmond Doss, who was the World War II soldier who was a Quaker, and he had a pacifistic desire to not hold a gun, but he wanted to serve in combat as a medic, and he had to fight the army in order to do that. And eventually, he ends up serving at the Battle of Okinawa, where basically his entire platoon gets wiped out, and he proceeds to, in one night, basically medically assist every single injured soldier that had been in the battlefield, get them all back to safety, and then manage to survive himself while being hunted by Japanese troops and saves like 50 lives. So it's this really intense story about physical violence in contrast with like divine grace. And I think that that's something you see a lot. Like even in movies it doesn't necessarily direct, because you can see it in his performances.
That's beautiful. And I didn't know that one. I'm gonna have to watch that. But I see it, yes. And this is what I recognize and start recognizing in Patriot and Braveheart, the primary driving tension is he doesn't want to have to fight, right? And in Braveheart he wants to go back home and get married and have a family, and he only goes to fight against the English because they murder his wife. But that he is, and similarly in Patriot, right, that he wants to have his family and his house, and he only ends up going and fighting the British when they come and attack his family. So he's, in that frustration with the need for violence, it's interesting that he sort of gives himself the role of father protecting family a lot. And now that I've gone on a sort of more Mel Gibson marathon over the last year or so, I do appreciate that much more, that there's a consistency in his roles. I was watching Signs as well, right? And it's like the father in that one. It's interesting because he's playing the priest who lost his faith when his wife got killed in a terrible accident, but regains it after he's able to basically save his children, right? So the father who needs to protect his children, and I appreciate that. One, he's made a giant mistake. He made the same, shall we psychoanalyze slightly, giant mistake my father did in his life, which is divorce and leaving his family and trying to remarriage. Did not go so well for either my father or Mel Gibson. I respect that I can see his fatherliness actually in the movies as well. And, so that the action hero is the one who's driven to protect by the danger that his children are in.
You can kind of see that there's almost like a kind of like a top link, or like dancing on a wire in his performances, where he knows he's always toppling above the void. And you see that a lot in The Patriot, because his background as a character, I think, is that he's fought in the French and Indian Wars, I think. And yes. so he has the tomahawk in his chest, and he has this secret past as this brutal killer who can just kind of switch on this incredible ability to just destroy human flesh on a whim. And you see that in the first action scene where he single-handedly just takes out an entire platoon of soldiers with his kids supporting him. Like this, he can just he can just go full warrior and just destroy everything in his path, because he's been through war, and war has just kind of manifested him in this incredible violence, and if that he gets sucked in the whole that film, he has this deep sense of fear that he's going to get sucked too deeply into the void and he's not going to be able to get out again, and he just wants to go back to his home after he's avenged his kids. And I even see that kind of mirrored in the villains, because the villains are Cornwallis and I forget the name of Jason Isaacs' character, but you have the very dapper, proper soldier who says, we're going to follow rules, we're not going to massacre civilians. The other one saying, I'm going to do whatever it takes to win for the British Empire. And you kind of see that just the tearing of a soul is between doing what's necessary to win versus not losing yourself in the war. And you see that on both sides.
Right, but I think it's interesting, like in Signs, that he doesn't end up, the violence there ends up having to be against the aliens, right? And it's just throwing water on it, which is painful too. So it's sort of an anti-baptism, I suppose, or something like that. And that the signs being that you have, it was an interesting movie for him to end up doing, since he's trying to say, is there meaning in our stories, right? And in movies, obviously, you're sort of trying to plot it so that the audience has the satisfaction of thinking, that particular thing, like in Signs, the little girl has all these glasses of water, which is really strange and weird. Why does she just keep drinking glasses of water and leaving them all around the house? spoiler alert, but when they end up having to fight the alien, water is the one thing that will hurt it. And so they have this room full of glasses of water that she's been leaving there, that you are hungry in history, in life, for the meaningful symbolism to be there, right? For that there's this thing that happens and it does actually have meaning. And the problem in Signs is, his wife's death doesn't really seem to mean anything, except for she tells him something that helps him at the end. I sure hope I'm not mixing up movies. And that Gibson is constantly setting himself up in these stories that resolve in meaning, and the violence is, I suppose, there as a feature in it, but it's not the point of it, right? It's the point is, and that's the Christian understanding, for all of this suffering, in fact, to have significance, and not just in like Christ died for us, but that the sort of the choices that we make through life actually do have a larger significance.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm not capturing this particularly well. It's like it works only visually.
Yeah, I haven't seen Signs in a few years, so I'm trying to. I don't really have much to contribute on that front, but I definitely.
It's corn circles, right? And so it's all the corn circles show up, and are there, what kind of evidence is there of actual alien activity? And it's very minimal, right? It's the small cast and minimal sort of special effects and things like that for an alien movie. It's all around the problem of creating pattern and understanding out of signs, right? So it's sort of in your face once you get to that part of it.
Yeah, it's curious that he ends up playing such a similar character in movies that have such different artists behind them. Like M. Night Shyamalan is very different from Roland Emmerich. I mean, these are. And then obviously he didn't direct any of the Mad Max films. He didn't direct any of the Lethal Weapon movies. But they all seem to have this weird through line where he seems to be playing very similar roles. Did you rewatch any of the Mad Max movies?
I have not ever watched them, right? I started watching the first Mad Max, and he's so young in that he doesn't even look like himself yet. Like, no, seriously, is that the Mel Gibson character? And then I could see where it was going, right? And so I'm like, no, I can't watch this. And what you say then shows me that I was predicting correctly where it goes.
Mad Max
he's going to have to end up revenging the death of his family, right? So
the first Mad Max, that's one of the first Mad Max is probably the only one where there's no actual like divinity in it. He just goes completely catatonic and just loses his soul by the end of it. And then every Mad Max movie.
I was right to stop watching them.
Yeah, I mean, every movie after that is fundamentally him questioning whether or not he should try to resurrect his soul again. So you got Road Warrior, which is okay. I meet this random town in the middle of the desert. Should I go out of my way to help them, or should I just leave? And there's the next one. He finds another town in the middle of the desert. Should I help them, or should I leave? Then they do the same. It's kind of the same thing with Fury Road. But then that one kind of brings it full circle, and it finally goes like unequivocally, I should help these people, and essentially he saves himself morally by the end of that movie. So I would say if you want to watch any of them, watch the fourth one just because it's the most standalone one, but it's also not terribly violent.
Well, I only want the true Gibson, right, that we're outlining here, and so among the other ones that I did watch, Hey Gringo, is that the right word, the right title? Where he's in the prison.
Get the Gringo?
Get the Gringo. He's in the Mexican prison, right? And ends up befriending the young boy and his mom, and having to, in fact, yet again, because he's in prison because he's caught with all the money, and he's up against the bad guys who are in charge of the prison and where else. But the redemptive arc is definitely there again. And so, as you're saying, you clearly know the directors in his oeuvre better than I do, but. Yes, after a while you realize there's just one Mel Gibson movie. It's the same one over and over again.
He also played Hamlet at one point, but I haven't seen that yet, so I don't know how to fit this in.
Well, that one, one I have seen that, and I don't remember it particularly well. But there's a line in Clueless where Cher is saying, the Josh's girlfriend is trying to say, this above all to thine own self be true, as Hamlet said, and Cher's like, Hamlet didn't say that. And the girl is like, oh, I know my Shakespeare. And she's like, yeah, but I know my Mel Gibson. And he never said that. It's true. It's Polonius, right? So, yes, that he's playing Hamlet is an appropriate one. Hamlet doesn't end up saving himself, but he's struggling with the problem of justice, obviously. So it makes sense that's the Shakespeare that Gibson did. And, that makes it, going back to his faith, right? This is a fundamentally Christian arc throughout all of them, that he is trying to understand action in our fallen situation, right? It's like we do sometimes have to fight in order to defend our loved ones, our families, our homes, Patriot, right? At what point is it appropriate for Christians to become knights?
That's probably a good transition into Apocalypto, because we haven't talked that much about it yet, but it's probably the one we probably could spend the most time on, just because I think that there's, of all of his movies, that one is probably the most, I'm almost going to say underrated, but it's definitely the one that has, like, you can kind of sense where they put the most thought into it, just because obviously you have to kind of put a lot of thought into a movie where you don't kind of belong to this culture, and you have to kind of build it from scratch and bring all these disparate elements together, and shoot it in a different culture and shoot it in a different country. But it is such a fascinating film from especially from like a Catholic integralist perspective. Like, you can definitely sense like this, even though there's almost no touch of Christianity till the very like final shots of the movie. You just get the sense that this movie is just about the collapse of either a pre-Christian or a post-Christian world, and you can see him just kind of drawing the lines between this movie and modern life in kind of a Russell Kirk kind of way,
Russell Kirk loses me, but what's interesting about it, and this is where, because I have. Now we're going to go off into like Master and Commander and stuff like that. You're right. The conquistadors show up at the end of Apocalypto, and this was the scene that Milo had always talked to me about. He's saying, Leopard Paw has escaped from being sacrificed and gotten back to his part of the jungle and rescued his family, right? Again, the father taking care of his wife and children, and they see the Spanish ships with their crosses on their sails coming into the bay, and the two hunters who have been chasing him go out to meet the Spaniards, and he doesn't. Leopard Paw doesn't. The wife says, do you think we should go talk to them or meet them or something? And it's all subtitle, right? Because it's all in Mayan. And he says, no, I think not. And that's a funny thing to think, if you're saying that the Catholics show up and save him from being sacrificed. That's not what happened. That is not at all what happened. And historically, what's funny about that scene is the Spanish who do show up in the Yucatan in that sort of moment probably get sacrificed themselves. So there's a bunch of irony playing out in exactly who is the, sort of what's the lesson in the movie. And so when I sat down to watch it, one, I'd seen the previews, and I have in my teaching, I regularly have the students talk through Cortez's expedition, because we read Bernal Diaz's Conquest of Mexico, and so some of the descriptions that the famous descriptions of the sacrifices off the tops of the temples and so forth. My guess is they're all coming from Bernal Diaz, right? So I'm very familiar with those passages, because I always assign them to get the students to pay attention. It's like, this is what Diaz and the other conquistadors were seeing. The men basically butchered, the bodies thrown down the steps, the piles and piles and piles of bodies at the bottom, and so forth. That they put in the movie, and I could tell from the previews long before I saw it that was going to be the burden of the scene. But when I watched the movie, I realized it was infinitely richer than I had expected. It wasn't simply a historical epic showing the arrival of the Europeans, fixing everything. That's not what it is about at all.
No, and I think that ending it's not clear exactly what the point is in context in terms of what it ultimately accomplishes or what it's meant to mean. I mean, Milo's idea that it's supposed to be like the essentially the redemption of South America it doesn't feel quite right, just because it doesn't seem that there's no continuation to seeing how that would manifest, and it's not clear what it means to these characters that what it means, because we don't actually get to see them talk, which would be that would be the important thing if if this was supposed to be like the moment that that this entire continent is saved, or something of that matter. I mean, I listened to the commentary track because I wanted to see if I could get a little bit of extra insight on it, and apparently Gibson says that this is very specifically supposed to be Columbus's third or fourth expedition to the New World, and it wasn't the conquistadors specifically, but audiences weren't clear specifically who it was. So but apparently this was supposed to be the first contact moment where this one culture comes in, and it's the first time they kind of interact, but we don't get to see that. So I mean, like I said last time,
because that's not what the movie is about. And I guess I looked up what the first Yucatan expedition was. As you know, as we can say, like with Braveheart, it's kind of irrelevant, because what Gibson is doing, although he's using historical details, his myth is, you know, it's fundamentally about the corruption of cities, is what I saw in it. And you know, where he imagines the Spanish coming from in that moment, in Bernal Diaz's account of the conquest of New Spain, he concludes with a great sort of paean to all of the good things that the Spanish brought to Mexico. And you know, the most important thing in Bernal Diaz's account of what the Spanish accomplished was overthrowing the Aztecs, right? And I mean, Apocalypto is not in fact about the Aztecs, apparently. It's about the Mayans, so it's different. I mean, the Aztecs in Mexico, as you learned from Diaz, were hated by everybody in the region, which I think is shown in Apocalypto, because they were using, you know, prisoners and tribute, you know, people given in tribute as their sacrifices in the city. The Aztecs, who are in control of Tenochtitlan, the Mexico City, basically, are hated by all of the peoples that Cortez comes into contact with on his march across the I think of it as a peninsula, but it's not really fat part, Central America, right? He's marching from Veracruz to Mexico City, and along the way he collects allies who tell him how much they hate the Mexicans, the Aztecs. And it's from some of those accounts of what Cortez saw and the Spanish in that situation witnessed that I think we get the details that are in Apocalypto, you know, the way they conducted the sacrifices and things like that. So it's there's the Apocalypto starts with the people living in the village, and you know, it's obviously, you know, wildly idyllic, and the men have the hunting party, and they have this, you know, wonderful camaraderie, and the teasing the man who he hasn't been able to get his wife pregnant yet, and there's that horrible time when his mother-in-law is sitting outside the house trying to, you know, like, make sure they're doing it right. Why aren't we having any children? Why don't we have any children? That it's all, you know, the family life all focused on what matters for the men is being strong hunters and being fathers, right? And then I don't want to call them slave captures, because it's not really a slave drive, right? They're harvesting the villages to capture people for the sacrifices, and they take them to the city. That's when, I mean, one, it's horrible when they've got captured and they see, you know, their father killed, and the sort of can the young men who have been captured and are being taken to the temple, can they be sort of courageous, right? They're warriors, but they're hunters, and you know, are they going to die well? Effectively, is the way they set it up, and it's very, very creepy when they get to the town and they see all of the people. They're building the great city and they're whitewashing all the stuff, so everybody's in, all the slaves that are working there are all covered in the whitewash
I think
stone.
It's limestone.
Lime, right? Yeah, they're all covered in that, and so they're kind of ghost-like and spooky. I mean, that's probably very perfect. And then when the men who are going to be sacrificed, they pass through that tunnel where they see the pictures of the people they're blue, right? And they're covered in all the blue paint, and then they start seeing like this is happening to you. And they get to the top of the pyramid, and that is like the creepiest scene I've ever seen in my life, because you have the little short guy who's the priest in the giant headdress, and he's telling the people who are watching down from the plaza about how the sun's being eaten and so forth. And this is the genius of the movie. All this can happen, and there are no words necessary to it. You see the priest and his performance, you see the king or the whatever cacique, the lord, right, and his family, and the favorites and such like that, and then the men who've been painted blue brought up there, and they're all trying to encourage each other, die well, right? Don't be afraid, you can die well, even if they've been watching the people go before them be beheaded and their bodies thrown down the steps. What is that scene about, right? The rest of it, once the eclipse stops or whatever, I can't remember. Is it eclipse stops? The leopard paw is not sacrificed, right? For freak reason. He was up next. They have him ready to have his heart cut out, and they don't need it anymore. Like, weird, eh?
It's a weird moment, because you don't expect an eclipse just to happen out of nowhere, but it ends up being like vitally important to that scene, because Mayan cosmology, the sun, the moon, and the stars were a huge part of their religion. So the idea of just like, the gods is eating the sun, so he's been satisfied. He doesn't need any more bodies, and then they just quietly turn to them and decide, just kill him out back. We don't need him. That's what he basically says.
And it's brilliantly well done, right?
It makes me think that
callousness of we've got enough blood now. And there's a kind of look that the priest gives when he's making that decision, sort of like, okay, and this very slight, do they believe it or not, right? The ruling class who has gotten the city up in this, you realize I'm watching this and going, gee, topical, gotten the city up into this frenzy, and the people of the city are all, they're not like the people in the village where they have families and responsibility between the generations or anything like that. They're all grotesquely decorated, and the women are all, sort of, everybody feels sinful and lustful and degenerate as they're baying for these young men to be sacrificed for their, as the priest is narrating it, right, for their safety. We need these young men to die so that your city can continue to
the gods
function.
Will bless our crop yields, or whatever they think they're doing it for, essentially.
Right, but that is it's much deeper and more horrible. In the true sense than that, because you realize what Gibson is showing you is modern civilization.
Yeah,
that they live in these dysfunctional, corrupt, it's sort of interesting watching the depiction of the people that the men are having to be paraded through as they're touching them. It's like, these men are going to die so that we can continue living in this completely, what I think I was watching, is it before or after I watched the Mouse Utopia experiment, right? It's very much like the Mouse Utopia. It's like all of these mice crowded into, they weren't really crowded, all of these mice in this completely artificial environment, which basically lose the ability to function as mice. They start, sort of worrying about how beautiful they are, or how they don't mate anymore, so they're having families and having children. And that is, I think, the city that Gibson is portraying in Apocalypto, and it's literally fed with the blood of these healthy young men who were brought in from the countryside.
Yeah. And like you said, it's fascinating just to see how little the people in charge just seem to believe it or not. Like it's clear the priest is he's a demagogue. like in the commentary track, they said they literally based that guy's performance off of Mussolini. Like he said.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
Like he told them, like, we want you to kind of embody this ability to kind of stand in front of a crowd and command them and bring this kind of emotion out of them. You have to be that kind of person. And apparently he was like a no name. Most people were no name actors, and he just was able to do it. And the fact that subsequently when the fact that they just basically they don't even bother to like free him. It's like, well, we don't need him, but I guess we'll just let the Warriors have target practice with these guys that aren't going to die now. So we'll let them have him. So and it's the casual cruelty on display it's striking. Like it's not even just that they're cynical in the way that they throw these people to cut their heads off and throw their bodies down a pyramid. It's that they're willing to additionally just kill someone. Just so that their warriors who want someone else to kill can have an extra person to kill too.
Right. Now, who do you think? What's the allegory? Who is this?
The warriors specifically, or the people?
All of it.
Well, cities, but
us. Yeah. I mean, it's talking about. I didn't remember Gibson is actually in the Passion of the Christ as the centurion. I didn't as Longinus. Okay, I didn't remember that. But this is
you don't notice him because he doesn't have the John Wayne King of Kings line, so it's not obvious.
Okay.
So.
Truly, this was the son of how was that?
It's more subtle than that.
Anyway, Apocalypto is showing the perverted sacrifice of modernity, and that's why I think it's like the Spanish. Insofar as modernity has done nothing to stop this kind of, well, how are we going to keep our cities going? We're going to bring young men in from the countryside, right? Iowa farm boys, basically, or anybody think Iowa farm boys. We're going to capture them, bring them into our military, dress them up in a fancy costume, paint them blue, right? Send them out to die for no reason whatsoever, other than that we, as an empire, need death. It's the most brutal takedown of, in fact, all of the kinds of things Gibson has been showing in his other movies, of the way in which civilization cynically uses the death of young men to fuel it. And it's literally, it's like, if you want to understand modern warfare, right? You might as well take the young men up on the top of the pyramid, throw them over on their back, and slice their heart out and feed it to the sun god, because it's just as meaningful. And so not even our crops need it, right? It is anti-Christian in the sense of this is the antithesis of the sacrifice of Christ. But it's one of the interesting ways, and again, I don't know if Gibson thought about this at all, but one of the interesting things that in the actual 16th century debate over how to respond to these human sacrificing cannibals was Bartolomé de las Casas, against whom Bernal Diaz was explicitly writing, because de las Casas is famous for saying, dear kings, he wrote to Philip and his father Charles and said, all of these atrocities are happening in your name in the New World, right? In New Spain, particularly some of the things that Bernal Diaz described in his story. For example, the massacre at Cholula. And what De las Casas says is, you kings, you should stop this. This isn't Christian behavior. And he writes another. That's in the brief description of the Indies. He writes another book called In Defense of the Indians, which says, they're rational, just like we are. They're human beings. So within Christian theology, of course, they're rational, because that's what we are, rational. They have, complicated civilization, complicated culture. That they sacrifice human beings in the way that they do, De las Casas argues, is because within reason, that makes the most sense, right? You're going to make the sacrifice to the gods as you understand them. And without Christ, without revelation, that's what you end up with, right? It's sort of rational. Now, I don't think Gibson in Apocalypto means it to be rational, but he is showing, and this is where Milo was correct, right? He is showing what the world looks like without Christ. The problem is in the movie, it's not the Spanish you're going to bring it, but that, without the understanding of Christ's sacrifice, you end up with sacrificing your young men to the mob for no reason. I mean, there's no meaningless death for the leopard paw and his companions.
Wasn't Jonathan Pajot just tweeting a couple of weeks ago something along the lines of, like, don't think that human, like, sacrifice isn't the most natural thing in the world, because this is literally one of the most common things in all human existence. Like, this is the fact that modern people don't think that we commit human sacrifice in ways that are just banal to us is just, it's everywhere. Like, it's not because people are just killing people randomly on the streets. It's that, I mean, I'm trying to say it, and they're trying to say not dark things, but abortion. I mean, there's stuff.
Oh, like it's abortion, utterly, absolutely, and it's just when you said banal, right? It's just as callous as in Apocalypto, the scene of these men being killed in the sacrifices. The crowd is cheering it on, and it's that you do it as in Apocalypto with them being thrown over the rock and having their hearts cut out. It's blunt, right? But it's right. Jonathan's right, as usual. The Roman gladiatorial games were similar. That was human sacrifice, absolutely. I do think what Gibson was trying to show in that is also what he showed in his other movies about how warfare is, in effect, a kind of human sacrifice. The execution that Wallace is subjected to in Braveheart is another kind of, it's like all of these are human sacrifices. The only sacrifice that is not diabolical in this way is Christ.
Yeah, I mean, and let's not overstate it. The unstated subtext of Apocalypto is that we're watching a society in its final moments. Like, even if the Spanish weren't about to come over and colonize the Yucatan Peninsula, you know that this society is in its death throes when it's clear. I mean, I believe a lot of the I don't remember which one, but a lot of the ancient Central American societies, a lot of them just kind of went extinct because they cut down all their trees, and erosion essentially destroyed all of their crop yields and destroyed all of their water supply and made it impossible to live in these cities. Like, civilization, as they practice it, killed them. It destroyed itself. And I think that you're kind of seeing, you're watching a what's it called? Micro something. I'm forgetting my English is draining away as I speak, but it's a microcosm of how society and how modern society itself is destroying itself. It's every cause kind of wrapped up in even outside of just those two scenes that we've spent like half an hour discussing. You see the outskirts of this town, just they're ripping apart the nature. They're ripping apart everything. Like they're
Right.
flattening the society around them. They're using it to feed this beast. And you see, at one point, you even see a girl who appears to have smallpox, just kind of wandering around one of these sites where they just gotten done pillaging. So you just know this city, this entire civilization, is sickly. It's on the brink, and they don't seem to recognize it. And that's and I guess that's probably why the main character is ultimately able to escape it. Is just because he can go back to his place where he has the advantage and use all of that against them when they because they leave their element, and suddenly they're dealing with nature and dealing with someone who actually is kind of more in tune with what it means, what a proper human being should do, and they ultimately all die, except for the ones that end up, I assume, converting to Catholicism when they talk to the Spaniards, I guess, but I don't know for sure.
Well, we don't know. I mean, he leaves that open, but yes, the leopard paw goes back and he rescues his pregnant wife who gives birth, at the time, and his son, and that's that he which she says, should we go talk to the Spanish, and he says, no, we don't need to. Let's go back into the forest. That there is obviously a strong call to go back and take care of your own family always. I mean, it's interesting that Gibson's movies constantly end up that way. Either it's like in Lethal Weapon, he's mourning his wife, right?
Yeah, he's suicidal because his wife died.
Right. So the only comfort and joy that a man is going to have is in that homestead, right, in that family. And so Leopard Paw is not looking for another civilized savior. He's recognizing his own responsibilities, and that's taking him out. But I think so. The civilization in decline. I know that's the way they described it and pitched it. It's like, oh, this is why the Mayans disappeared and so forth. But my sense of it is this is a perennial story. The problem of ending up living viciously and expecting to be able to sacrifice other people's lives so that you can carry on in your dysfunction is I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's the Mayans or the Romans, right?
Yeah.
It's us now. It's always us now in the representation. And once you don't get off, no European civilization gets off the hook, right? Because he's basically just mirroring it.
Yeah, I mean, any modern story is ultimately about something modern in the sense that you make a story like this to capture something about how this happened in history, so we can understand it in us. And even if it was Mel Gibson's stated goal to make something that was specifically historical, I don't see how you look at Apocalypto and not just say this is about us. This is about our society rotting from the inside out.
Right, it's an allegory. It's definitely an allegory, and Braveheart's an allegory for freedom and patriotism and things like that. But that's I realize now that I can just enjoy Mel Gibson because he's basically always been making The Passion of the Christ. He's always been making this, as you were saying, that transcendence is there even in the movies where it's apparently showing the fall, right? And that's why I have this. I can't remember whether you and I talked about this before, but I did talk about this with E. Michael Jones when we did the video on horror, right? And saying none of Mel Gibson's movies, except maybe Mad Max, but I haven't really seen that one. None of them that I've seen are in fact horror movies, because horror movies, and then this I would say the horror of life, right? The sort of lies of stories. Horror movies, sort of set you up in one situation, disrupt it, pervert it, show you that, whatever you thought was true is in fact fake. And, the reality is in a proper horror movie, right? You think that there's tropically, right? The family moves to a new house, it's going to be their new home, and everything turns out to be ghosts. Poltergeist, right? This is one of the last great horror movies I was able to watch and all the way through. That Mel Gibson's movies, they never, from my perspective, they never seem to turn to horror, right? They turn to meaning and significance, and you're saying transcendence and understanding, but they don't show you, they don't try to lie to you at any point, right? There's however violent they are, but they stay in truth the whole time. And I found that the only movies that I've been able to watch for the last few years, because since I was confirmed a Catholic, or since the reality of modern academia actually hit me full face, and thinking that I've been living this lie forever, watching any other movies other than his, there's always this moment where it's happy, it's fun, it's joyful, bango, it's basically Rocky Horror, right? The horror sticks in, and there's nothing fun about any of the setup that you've been shown. And Gibson doesn't do that. I find that very, very interesting, that his movies, as violent as they are, and as you can see, I never seem to watch them twice, except for, maybe some of them I want, but they just stick with me forever because they're so pure.
Yeah, that's why I've been coming back to them so frequently. And there are a couple I don't know how I would fit into the particular. I think I watched Man with a Mask once, and that one's a particularly strange one because it was very early in his career when he didn't know how to direct. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how to add to that meaningfully. I mean, it's
well, I don't think I
viciously.
finished watching all of them. So I've watched some of his romantic comedies and watched a number of the action films, and then you've watched all the ones that you really wanted to watch. So you start watching all of the others too, and yeah, there's a comforting consistency in the message that his movies convey, which is distinct and completely different from pretty much every other movie that I can think of. Start realizing that almost nothing else that I watch that I even enjoy or used to enjoy doesn't turn to horror at some point. And I'm saying Apocalypto turns to, and I think horror is, in Mike Jones's argument, it's the justice that comes that you can't acknowledge that you are incapable of achieving in your own life, particularly sexual sins, and therefore the horror is sort of cathartic to people watching it, because at least the bad characters in the story get exercised or killed or whatever. Apocalypto isn't horror in that sense. There's this recognition of what's going on, and it's horrible to see them being executed, but there's the consistency of truth throughout means that there's never that. Horror means that suddenly the thing that you thought you knew, you don't know anymore. And that's not what happens to me when I'm watching Gibson's movies.
Yeah, I think the word viscera probably fits better for Mel Gibson, because there's a sense of just like the horror of realization that the human body is just a pile of essentially gunk, in contrast with the fact that it is in fact that there is a spirituality behind that, and it's basically kind of has both of those thoughts in its mind at the same time, where you can be horrified that a character's body is being torn apart, but you're also horrified by the part but you're horrified by the reality of a person descending to the level where they can do that, because you realize they have a soul, and you realize they have something within them that can descend to that point, and something that can descend out of that point for the characters that don't fall into that void.
Well, in that sense, the violence is more like in the Christian stories of martyrs, which if you read the details, I've spent this past 6 months reading Don Prosper Guéranger's liturgical year, which means basically every other day you have the story of a martyrdom. People being beheaded and disemboweled, and this, that, and the other. It happens on a regular basis. This past week was June 29th was Peter and Paul, right? So you heard about Peter being crucified upside down and so forth. That the violence in Gibson's stories is of that character, right? And the saints, are dying in faith, which is extraordinary and sobering in a sense, right? It's like, wow, that's real. Their life was just as they were just as alive as we are, and it's no small thing to be taken to the Colosseum and have the wild beast set upon you, or have your head chopped off by the missionaries that do indeed go to different parts of the world and get executed in a variety of ways, but they die with faith in Christ. That's astonishing, impossible, miraculous. How do you explain that? And that Gibson, I do wish I knew more about his own personal faith. Seeing him with Altman, and Altman's been, I don't know whether he's on.
There's a lot of writing online about Gibson's faith. I know he's a
okay.
He's a
he's an old Catholic, right? But
he's pre-Vatican II, so
yeah. But he's friends with Altman, who's now famous for standing up against his own bishop, right? It's he clearly Gibson recognizes these fellow warriors, right, in the faith. That and I would find it interesting. It's like how, obviously I know all of this from my scholarly world. I don't know how Gibson knows it, is what I'm really saying. I don't know where it comes from in his own knowledge.
I know his dad's a big deal in his in both in his intellectual and spiritual life, but I don't think he has any sort of formal background in it. So I don't have a good answer in that regard. I just think that but it's clear that it's manifested in his life in a way that you very rarely see in an artist. Like, even, like, I don't know any other filmmakers that are as religious as him that manifest it in the way he does. I know other people that can do mythic filmmaking, like along the lines of like a John Ford, but he is doing something completely different. Maybe.
Right, and is there anybody else who does actual Christian mythology as opposed to
Frank Capra?
Fantasy? Sorry?
Frank Capra, maybe? I would have to think. I have to seriously think about that. I mean, maybe Scorsese when he does his religiously themed films, but it's hard to just square like artists who are very specifically Christian with their work, because most filmmakers are they self-identify as atheists, so they would not have that sort of drive. And then there are Christian filmmakers that are not filmmakers, so they just suck. So it's you don't usually get both of those things at the same time. But
it's rare in any case. But you're right? And so that's why I sort of on the diet of Mel Gibson movies, because I don't trust anybody else not to take me to horror.
You can watch Frank Capra movies, and he's not exactly going to take you to horror. So
okay,
I mean, it's a Wonderful Life is not a horror movie, so I think you're fine.
That's true.
It's probably one of the more arguably one of the more Christian films out there, even though it's not 100% explicit. But you know what I mean.
You can give me a list, and for our next episode, you can get me to watch some of those.
I'll dig through my movie collection, and I'll see what I can find. Because I know I have a lot of religiously themed movies, but it's hard to kind of nail down movies that kind of hit that perfect Mel Gibson stride, where they just kind of embody all these themes at once, and not aren't compromised in any sort of way. So.
Right. So I did recently rewatch Seventh Seal, which I hadn't seen since college. And, it's like, so the Dance with Death and Play Chess with Death. And it's like, okay, this isn't even medieval in certain ways, right? And it's like it's the gloominess. It's not going to be the full understanding of what it means, what it meant even in the Black Death, right? And of course the witch is the center of the story is when the young woman who's basically just crazy is executed as a witch. That's much more usual in my experience, and people are always asking me, it's like, do you read this? Do you like this? Do you what? And it's like, medieval themes don't necessarily mean they have anything to do with actual medieval Christianity, right? They're usually worse than historically inaccurate. I mean, Braveheart, the church doesn't really feature in it, and the droit de seigneur is of 19th century fantasy, so the raping of the young woman by the Lord is good for movies, I suppose. But it's very, very hard to find someone representing an actual
there was
one sacramental but Christian understanding of the mysteries.
There was one earlier this year that it wasn't Christian. It was actually an Orthodox Jewish film. It was a kind of like a exorcist horror style movie, and it was kind of about just kind of the what's the right word for it? I guess kind of just like the existential malaise that's kind of inherent in Orthodox Judaism, just the deep sense of fear of God that comes with that ideology, the fear of the unknown, if that makes any sense. And it's a very interesting horror movie in terms of like its depiction of like Jewish mysticism, but it goes very dark in terms of like the gore. So I don't know how much I'd recommend it, but that one kind of, it struck an itch in a way I wasn't expecting it to. So I'm thinking if I did dig through my movie collection, I probably could come up with a pretty good list, preferably ones that aren't horrifically graphic, but it's hard nowadays.
I don't like horror, right? I'm telling you, I can't watch
it. I'll do my best not to throw too many of those into the list, but
unless it's Mel Gibson. No, and the thing is, with his, I can't even watch them twice, right? It's like it sears into my memory. I'm telling you, I've done this conversation on the basis of seeing these movies once. I had seen Braveheart and then I rewatched it. but for the most part, it's like I have my visual memory is too strong. I can't get myself to go through it again.
Well, that's one of the marks of a good movie is if you can watch it once and then talk about it for the rest of your life. So,
well, there you go.
all right.
I mean, there are other movies that I'll watch. It's like Clueless. I have watched many times because it's witty and I enjoy it. And
there you go.
I like the outfits, but the Gibson, he makes these icons, right, and they just sear into my memory.
So I don't want to keep you out too late. It's 9 o'clock where we are. Do you want to kind of plug what you've been doing recently, or do you want to plug your?
Oh yes, of course. So please watch my Tolkien videos. I just recorded number 41 today on the Soup of Stories, and I've now made the arc through the sort of design of my campus course. We start with the problem of creativity. We work through that for 20 episodes, and then the most recent 20 episodes have been a lot about creation and the Silmarillion and the fall, and dealt with various things. Got to Gondolin, right? I did an episode on Gondolin, which is going to be posting in a few weeks. My poets and I are working on our Aurora Borealis, our bear quest to Antarctica. That should come out later this summer. We have an artist for that one. She actually does animation, so we have a kind of movie tie-in with pictures for that. And since you and I talked, my poets published Centrism Games, which is a satire making fun of both left and right for always compromising in service of Fama, the goddess Fame.
Well, there you go. Go subscribe to her on Authorized TV, and one of my other favorite YouTubers is on there too. So definitely go give her some support. So.
Oh, which one? We have new characters. Stefan Molyneux is there now. Razor Fist, yes, Razor Fist has joined us in the last few months. So it's definitely worth subscribing to Unauthorized because you get Tolkien, you get philosophy, you get homesteading, you get Owen's live streams.
I think Stefan Molyneux just joined too, so they're yours.
Stefan Molyneux joined, yes. The Unauthorized and we're going to start having live streaming. Hopefully soon. Vox has been live streaming off of it, so my repertoire is going to be able to expand there.
Yeah. Well, when you said that you just recorded an episode of Tolkien today. Is that the one about Professor Ordway?
So I'm not with her. I was talking about her book,
yeah, about
right? Tolkien's Modern Reading, yeah, and it was nice as a sort of. I've now been working on the Tolkien episodes for a year, and she's sort of starting my second season in my head. Right, I've talked through my understanding of wanting to be inside Tolkien's story and how that plays out in a number of different ways. And with her book, sort of opening up the gates to start talking about, Tolkien in reference to all of these other stories. Although I still have a lot of Tolkien still to cover, so I deal with specific characters. I deal with specific themes. I have dealt with marriage. I've dealt with a lot of theology, music.
Well,
I hope you will subscribe.
I mean, you could literally spend the rest of your career just making videos about every facet of Tolkien's world and every idea and every exigent theme and character, and just forever, because it doesn't ever end.
Well, that's what his son did, basically, and I'm not sure I'm as wedded to his legacy as his own son.
Well,
but
yeah, there you go.
What I do realize is, my larger project, including with the poetry, is not appreciating the problem of creativity and story, and what we're practicing in Centrism Games and Aurora Borealis is the sort of invention that Tolkien himself practiced, which is what I talk about in today's episode with Ordway's book, showing you how you draw in all of these stories for your own creativity and your own storytelling. And we can see that, Gibson does that beautifully as well, that he's taking historical events and different tropes and crafting new stories out of them that always then also resonate because they point to the grand story that we are actually living.
Well, that brings it full circle.
Creation and redemption.
That brings
Yes.
it full circle beautifully. All right. Have a good night then. I'm tired. I want people that need.
Oh, right. Okay. Bye.
I'm sorry. I'm tired. I don't know how
Thank
to.
you.
I don't know how to transfer out of this. So.
What I need is like closing music for my videos, because you're always, thank you for joining me, and you cue the exit music and everybody feels like, roused.
There you go. Have a good night then.
Okay, bye. Thank you, Tyler.
The AntiSocial Network is a Groupthink Productions podcast. Editing, producing, and hosting are by Tyler Hummel, artwork by Crystal Cowley, and original music was composed by Melissa Lafira and the late Dan Smolla. Like, subscribe, and please let us know what you think about the show in the comments below if you'd like to see anyone interesting be a guest on the show. Thank you for listening.